Dairy farming is a key component of the agricultural landscape here in the UK, with about 15 billion litres of milk produced from our 1.9 million dairy cows. A large component of caring for those 1.9 million dairy cows is getting our feed nutrition exactly correct, because having a balanced diet means that cows can produce milk as efficiently as possible. Like us humans, dairy cows need a balanced diet of energy, of protein, of vitamins and minerals, but unlike us, the quantities of energy and protein that they need are much, much greater. So for example, if a dairy cow is at peak milk production, she can be producing over 50 litres of milk each day. To be able to do that, she needs to consume as many calories in one single day as an adult man consumes in the whole of a month. So as you can see, the challenge for feeding dairy cows is quite a big one. But actually here in the UK, we're really lucky because we have a natural feedstuff available to us to feed to our cows, and that is grass. So dairy cows are ruminants, which means they have the ability to break down complex carbohydrates like cellulose that we typically find in plants and are indigestible to humans. So effectively what a dairy cow is doing is taking a product that we can't eat, such as grass, and turning it into something that we can consume, such as milk. Because of our temperate climate here in the UK, our mild winters and our relatively high volumes of rainfall that we get, we have a brilliant ability to produce high volumes of grass. In fact, grass is actually our most important crop for us here in the UK, occupying about 70% of our utilised agricultural area. In fact, we estimate that overall that area, we produce about 42 million tonnes of grass each year, which is consumed by our dairy cows, by beef animals and by sheep as well. So a lot of our research here at AFBI has focused on the role of grass in dairy cow diets and what the potential benefits can be of feeding grass to cows. So if we look at increasing the amount of grass that we feed to cows, we can produce milk with a lower overall environmental footprint, reducing not only the amount of phosphorus that we could potentially lose to the environment, and in particular our waterways, but also lowering our overall ammonia emissions to the atmosphere. So increasing the proportion of grass in dairy cow diets also allows us to produce a healthier product for the consumer. The higher amount of grass that we feed to cows means that we can raise the amount of polyunsaturated fatty acids available in the milk, and we also see increases in the vitamin D content of milk as well, leaving us with an overall healthier product for the consumer. To help farmers maximise the amount of grass that they're feeding to dairy cows, there are a number of different things that we need to focus on from a science perspective. Firstly, it's understanding our landscape and the amount of grass and the quality of grass that that landscape can produce. Secondly, it's understanding animal grazing behaviour and what motivates and encourages an animal to eat grass on a daily basis. And thirdly, as our dairy farms become a lot more technologically advanced, it's really about understanding how we can use that data and how we can use that technology to better understand and manage our grassland environment as a whole.
A really important aspect of grassland management is regularly measuring how much grass is available on the different fields across the farm through the grazing season. By measuring this, the farmer's going to know when the grass is at its most nutritious and how and when to graze it most effectively. It also helps them to allocate the right amount of pasture to the animals. So if we take the example of a dairy cow in peak lactation, she could be eating as much as 17 kilograms of dry grass in a day. It's important for farmers to allocate the right amount of grass to cows to meet their appetite, but they don't want to allocate too much more than that, otherwise the grass is going to be wasted. So there are two well-established methods for measuring grass. The first one is by taking quadrat clips, so you might take 5 spread across the paddock. You then take that grass back to the house or to the office and you would weigh it. Ideally, you'd then dry the grass and re-weigh it to get an estimate of the dried grass that's available in the paddock. The second method is to use a plate meter and walk across the paddock taking regular plonks to measure the average height of the grass that's under the plate. We can then use an equation to estimate the mass of the grass that's available in the paddock. Plate meters can be very good. You can take a lot of readings across a paddock to get better estimates, and some of them now have Bluetooth and GPS capabilities as well. So they can send data straight to the farmer's phone and do all those calculations automatically. To try and encourage more farmers to take those regular grass measurements and use grass data throughout the growing season, at AFBI we've been looking at new technologies that aim to make that process quicker and easier. One of those pieces of equipment is a trailed pasture meter. So this is a unit that's towed behind a quad bike or an all-terrain vehicle, and it uses lasers to measure the grass height. As it's towed around the paddocks, grass passes through a channel that's inside the pasture meter, and at the back of the unit there are laser beams at different height intervals. So as the grass stalks break the laser beam, different height measurements are recorded, and we can then use a different set of equations that estimate grass biomass from those measurements. We've also been looking at drone technology and taking images which capture the reflectance of different light wavelengths from grass pastures. We've been particularly focusing on a measurement called Ndvi, so that's the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, and this is a measurement of the difference between the reflectance of visible red light, which chlorophyll in plant tissue strongly absorbs, and near-infrared, which is strongly reflected. We're working on equations to convert these readings into a measurement of the amount of grass biomass that's available in a pasture. Other parts of the light spectrum, particularly in the shortwave infrared range, contain markers that have previously been identified by studies in New Zealand to give us information about grass quality parameters as well. Specifically, we can identify markers for measuring crude protein and the sugar content, and we can measure those from the sky using drones and specialised camera technology. These approaches, so the drone and the trailed pasture meter, are particularly useful for showing us not only how much grass there is available on average in a paddock, but also how that amount of grass varies across different paddocks. We can use that information to more precisely target things like fertiliser applications to make sure that we're only applying them where they might be needed. We can also use remote satellite data to measure grass over a much larger area too. So at the moment, a lot of the satellite images we are using are limited because they can't take measurements through cloud cover, and obviously in the UK that can be a big problem. But there are new approaches which are looking at using naturally occurring microwaves and the reflections of those from the Earth's surface to tell us about vegetation covers regardless of weather conditions. Most of these technologies can cope with measuring both grass and grass pastures with different percentages of clover in them. Other trials that are running at AFBI at the moment are looking at adapting the equations we use to cope with measuring differences in multi-species swards and herbal lays, which many more farmers are starting to introduce now.
So another aspect of helping us to try and improve the amount of grass that cows are eating is to understand cow grazing behaviour. Recently we've been using rumination holders, which you can see here at AFBI, and these help tell us a little bit more about animals' eating behaviour. So the collar itself has a little sensor tube in here, and this detects every time the animal chooses to open her mouth to take a bite of grass or any other feed stuff like we have here, and then monitors how many times she effectively regurgitates her food and chews her cud to try and break down that forage further. This sort of information can tell us a lot about the cow's diet and how effective her rumen is working when she's ingesting feedstuffs, but in a grazing environment as well, it can also tell us about her different grazing pattern behaviour throughout the day and how that varies for individual animals. For example, one of the things that we've seen recently is actually we've been able to try and calculate how many hours a day a cow spends grazing. So cows typically spend about 9 hours a day grazing, but actually 90% of that actually happens during daytime and only 10% of that activity at night time. What we found by using these halters is that at night time cows prefer to lie down, regurgitate their food and chew their cud to break it down, and that's the activity they prefer to do at night. Understanding all these aspects of cow grazing behaviour really then help us manage the cow better. So we can look at the impact, for example, of grouping strategy of cows, of the effect of the amount of grass that we offer to cows on a single daily basis, and the timing in which we offer grass to cows as well, all of which will impact on their grazing behaviour and hopefully encourage them to eat more grass throughout the day. So over the past decade or so, we've seen a whole range of sensors and technologies been developed for our dairy production systems here in the UK. So we've got devices such as pedometers to measure cow movement, we've got drones to measure pasture from the air, and we also have automatic milking machines which effectively allow us to milk cows with minimal human intervention. All of these technologies and all of these sensors produce a huge wealth of data, which is brilliant for us as scientists because we can then start to understand a little bit more about each of these complex systems. Every time a cow walks into a robot, for example, we get 300 different individual data points, which we can then start to understand more about the cow from that experience. So whilst it's incredibly important to understand all the individual components of a grassland system, like the soil, like the plant, like animal behaviour, where the true value really lies is integrating that data to really understand how we can manage what is effectively quite a complex environment. So grassland systems, like many biological environments, are quite complex systems with a lot of interactions happening there. If we think about a grassland environment, we think about the variation that we have in soil type and the nutrient content of soil, the variation that we have just by having lots of different plant species growing there, and then we have animal variation as well, so different breeds, ages and types of animal that are grazing that grass. There's a lot of variation there. On top of that, we can also put our wonderful UK climate, which on a day-to-day basis, as we all know, can be hugely variable as well. So technology is now helping us start to capture some of that variation by lifting data on individual animals, on soil, on plants, and providing us with a wide range of metrics. Here at AFBI, we have a precision grassland platform, which is effectively an instrumented landscape full of sensors, which is helping us capture that data. This 70-hectare network, which is located across our main grazing platform here at AFBI, uses a series of towers to transmit data from a whole range of sensors on the plant, on the animal, back to us at a central location to allow that data to be integrated and analysed as one. In future, these sensors will help us understand and manage grassland systems in a much more effective manner. So using the platform, some of the questions that we can now start to ask are, do dairy cows change their behaviour depending on weather patterns? Can we provide longer term and more specific individual field forecasts for grass growth and grass quality in the future? And when we think about soil, can we apply nutrients as precisely as possible to make sure every inch of soil is in the best shape possible to produce as much grass? All of these new developments in science and technology and the data that we can collect from our agricultural systems make it a really, really exciting time for us as scientists to be involved in agricultural research and in particular in dairy grassland research here in the UK.